Need more Grok Talk? Well, you can catch new shows Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Miss a show? Not a problem. Past shows are rebroadcast here daily from 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions. Rock Talk. I'm here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, Jane Cormier is our guest host. Thank you very much for coming in. We're talking about addictions and government and all kinds of good stuff. Remind you, listen to this in past programs on Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, therocknhcr.com, Ustream, YouTube, and of course, granitrock.com. Go.
I screwed up,
Mr. Murphy.
To our leaders, I mean listeners.
Murphy's
laws has struck.
Yes.
Yeah,
Here I am. I'm actually switching all of the shots from the two cameras and trying to do everything right. And at the end of last segment, I noticed I hadn't started broadcasting the video or recording it.
So we're here to tell you that it was an awesome job, but you weren't allowed to see it.
Yeah, it's like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, except I didn't hit the right button at the right time, and I am so sorry.
Anyway, you could hear it, but you just couldn't see it.
So at least we had the audio version going out. So we
is that all?
Oh, it's on. I am recording. It is rolling on Spreaker. We're all set. Go ahead.
For the benefit of those of us who just joined us on Ustream, join in progress, as Rush would say. Skip was just talking about how the progressives make handling of any problem. You got to manufacture a crisis in order to have government solve it. You create a war on something on the specious argument that if you put the nation on a war footing for cancer, drugs,
alcohol,
poverty, everything, that somehow the people will rise. Not realizing that just like any other kind of addiction, including overloading yourself with adrenaline or caffeine, eventually the body just wears out and it doesn't rise to the occasion anymore. But the question I had is, we all know that the progressive era here and in the UK and, of course, even in the Soviet Union, because they weren't progressive back then, 1880 through 1920 was when a lot of the bad stuff happened. And then you said we started calling it a war on this or that in that period. So since I'm not as good a student of American history as I should be yet, who and what started calling government programs or drives a war on?
I think you can go back to, obviously, World War I, where Woodrow Wilson was the first one to do that. And we didn't have to get involved in the European War, which was the Great War, as it was called back then. We really didn't have to. Yes, there was the Lusitania and a couple other incidents that kind of were the straw that broke the camel's back.
Or false flag operations, as the case may have been.
Yeah, Woodrow Wilson really wanted to push it, and because he saw a vast vision of how he thought the world should be. So how do you mobilize an entire nation for a single purpose? You go to war. Now, it's one thing when it is an existential threat to your country, which I thought World War II was, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But we saw wars on legislations. That's how we lost the senators associated with the legislators to be sent to U.S. Senate, because a war on cronyism, a war on bad,
a war on corruption and bad
corruption. There we go.
in the state houses.
Yes,
and that somehow the system where senators are bought and paid for on a national basis is less corrupt than a system where occasional
it just became
deals
obvious
were done
that,
in state houses.
But Wilson's war economy was the realization of a progressive dream that led to the Bolshevik Revolution, that led to Nazism, that led the idea, not the actual thing, but the idea behind a war economy became this golden egg for would-be fascists and dictators around the world who would say, wait a minute, if we do this, and then that whole process led to the moral of equivalency of war arguments that we continue to battle with right now.
Yeah, and here's the really bad thing. the Industrial Revolution was taking place at that time, starting in Great Britain, and then the U.S. superseded it after, during and after World War I. But the whole idea of progressivism came up because they saw, some intellectuals saw that people are being reduced to just being cogs in a societal machine, because we had Darwinism starting up at the same time. And while they were fighting against the whole idea of the inhumane treatment of the cogs in the social model, now they've actually basically just taken that and internalized that, because they do see individuals as mere cogs in the machine. So they've gone full circle, and it took very little time to do that. The collectivism is nothing more, or the communitarianism is nothing more than seeing everybody as just a thing that is equal to anything else. You swap one in, swap one out, and that's how they view us, versus we conservatives who say every person, every individual is unique and should have that individual freedom to be left alone to seek their own happiness.
And somehow along the way the narrative got lost, because if you look at the feudal Europe that our forefathers, or your forefathers anyway, left to come here, everybody was a serf. They were just a cog on the farm owned by the Lord. Why would that be any different? So here was a nation of free men with a government that worked for them, and they could work the farm or they could work anything else. And if they chose to go to work in a factory, no matter the fact that the conditions might not be that great, they could always leave. Maybe when the factory owners were colluding in the late 19th century, they couldn't walk across town to another factory because they could be blackballed, but they could always leave town and go back to the farm. They were still free men. You had a choice not to be there.
Yeah, well, we see this all the time in the progressive era now, where they say, fight for 15, as if workers can't move from one McDonald's to somewhere else, better themselves. That the progressive model is that there's a constant, locked-in cement status quo. They have to change that status quo for whatever reason.
They've never run a business.
They've never run a business. But the point that I'm trying to make is that they've shifted their paralysis, really. But that's also coupled with the idea that history never starts until it only goes back as far as the day before you were born. That progressives don't look back into history to see what has and hasn't worked. They get rid of traditions. Or in most cases,
the last most inconvenient thing you were caught saying on the air.
Right. Well, they don't have to.
like Chucky Schumer in 2007 or Obama in 2006 over the Supreme Court nominations here.
Yep.
But that's the thing. If they want to eliminate those traditions, because traditions arise because stuff worked under those traditions. There's a reason why traditions are there in a lot of cases.
Traditions work with the people. Traditions give the people some sort of formative. You can get them together if they can go around a cause or like you said, an event or something. You know what's interesting to me while we're talking about how this all happened around the turn of the century, 1900, for progressivism? You have to wonder why we are where we are today, why it's getting worse with the advent of information media. I mean, you would think, you can kind of see in the old days how it worked because they maintained control of the press. They could put anything that they wanted through that vessel. And Americans, that was it. That was your information source, right? So you can kind of see how they got the early stranglehold on making the case for we need government. You need us, or we need to do this. Now here we have all of this alternative media. We have opportunity at our fingertips to see. And yet we are still in the vice of such a strong progressive. I wonder.
I have two thoughts on that.
I've got one too.
First is, if you go back to Dewey and the educational system, they've done a fine job of training people, regardless of what they see, to think that that's the way you should go. And my other thought was that on the opposite side is that this explains what people call that extremism, that divide. The divide was always there. It's just visible every single day in your
What
Twitter
divide?
feed. The right-left divide. There's always been a divide. I mean, National Review came about because of that divide. It did exist, and they had a way. They said, we're going to try to tap into that. And so that They created a magazine that was designed to be more conservative than what people were used to seeing in the media. And so now you've got people going, oh, those crazy. And that's just because they're deviating from the course set in stone for us by our masters, who want us all to be serfs. So now, thanks to the internet and talk radio, we have 24/7 access, 365 days a year, to the other side, which is what we do. We are the other side of that opinion.
So if that's true, how do we explain the Trump phenomenon?
I will tell you, in fact, there was gosh, I got to find it. I've got it bookmarked on my other computer back at home.
That's the 10-second internet attention span, I think.
Yeah, well,
Really?
I think so.
This Trump supporter was asked that question, and he said, it seems as if as the American populace gets more and more news, they become less and less savvy.
Really?
The more information that's available, the less they internalize it. And let's put it bluntly.
And is it because they were trained that way by the education establishment?
Well,
You mean they hear the news, but they reject it?
Well, not so much that, but I don't think the attention span of a gnat comes to mind.
But why? We have to ask, why does that happen?
Because we have the whole atmosphere of celebrityhood.
Yeah,
we have
that's
more
true.
people who understand what the Kardashians have just done in the last 30 seconds than what their legislatures are doing to them over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And also, I'll put it to you this way. As we have become more secular as a nation, and we can certainly see that here in New Hampshire, where we are the most secular state, least churched state in the Union, it brings to mind that phrase, if you don't believe in God, you'll believe in anything.
Yeah.
And we all know that belief in God requires belief in absolute values and morals, that they are rooted in our sacred writings, the Bible, and that they are part of our orthodoxy. Well, when you remove that, which really started, the freight train on that started really in the 60s, love the one you're with. If it feels good, do it. If it doesn't hurt somebody, it's okay.
Right.
Well, it's that last part that, going back to the attention span of a gnat and not worrying about history until it started the day before you were born, they don't understand that when you turn into a situational ethics society, that when you go into a relativism or postmodernism type philosophy where you can rationalize everything because nothing is of any consequence, there is no absolute truth. In fact, a lot of people believe there's no truth at all because my truth is not the same as yours. That is the relativism. So that's why you see.
I still don't understand it. I'll tell you.
But when you don't believe in God, you can believe in
there
anything.
are plenty of people that believe in God that are pushing for what Trump is selling, which is, I believe, progressivism that is blatant if you look at the last years, right? So why aren't we picking up on it? Why do we have supposedly, constitutionally and conservative
because
folks?
they're willing to believe. I think this goes back to movies and the media to some extent. The willing suspension of disbelief. They're willing to believe that Trump is a patriot, that he's somehow going to do the right thing.
Why are they willing, though? See, this is the morph, I think, that's happening. Before we had clearly defined where we were.
All right, I'm going to pick on you for just a minute. Instead of doing the eye roll, okay, which you just did.
Absolutely.
And
I'll do it again.
Yeah. You have to understand that for a lot of people, they are seeing that phrase, we're losing our country, and they take it extremely to heart. But again, we have that thin veneer of news, thin veneer of savviness, and the unwillingness to get down deep like we all do. We are news and political junkies. We are abnormal.
These people don't have a constitutional conservative principle morality on which to stand. Most of them don't. Now, some of the people, and this is a great filter because I've been working on a post for over a week that I can't word right that addresses this.
Yes.
And basically says, now, I have friends who are Trump supporters, and they're very enthusiastic, and they have different things. But, as you look at all the stuff that comes out and how they react to it, and then how they react to the lawfare, how they react to the crybaby stuff, how they react to the name, these are all liberal tactics, every single one of them.
Right.
And they ignore them, which tells me something about them, not just about Trump, which is that they are no better or worse than, say, all the Obama supporters who weren't really Democrats,
right.
who just jumped on board because he was the black guy.
It's the same thing.
It's the same basic concept. You're forgetting about the principles. If Ted Cruz comes out and legitimately goes off the rails, I'm not going to vote for him because I have principles and conservatism and values.
Correct.
And those are the things that define how I react to my family, my government, my friends, and so on and so forth. These people don't appear to have that. Now, we thought they did, some of them. But we've had people that we know who we thought were pretty decent Republicans or conservatives who have gone off and supported ridiculous things that deep down we know that if they thought about it, they'd be like, this is a liberal thing. This is a
whether it's
thing.
the ex-law enforcement officer who supports or supported Christie for reasons that I can't figure other than he's a good prosecutor.
It's the Trump test.
Yeah. Right. And a friend of mine who is, or I thought, a staunch conservative, but I know he's also a mercantilist. He wants some degree of protectionism against bad actors around the world, bring home some of our mining, manufacturing and stuff. And he is a Trump supporter. And there's just so many things wrong with the overall picture. We absolutely applaud what Trump has done to blow up the Overton window, to open up the discourse, to make it possible to really go after the malfeasance of government in general and the Republican Party.
And media.
And government, and the Republican Party, which should be the backstop that prevents all this in particular. And yet, we see he does this, and then people don't look beyond and say, but wait, this guy's a populist. I got called Goebbels this morning because somebody said something to the effect of, I like Trump because he's for national capitalism. And I said,
what?
So let me see. That would be more accurately phrased as national liberalism, a.k.a. national socialism.
No kidding.
Ask the Germans how that kind of populism worked out.
Yeah.
And I immediately got to be accused of being Goebbels.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what this has been a great conversation.
Name calling another left wing.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation. I don't think we've gotten this deep philosophically in a long time. This
2
is
minutes,
what I
2 minutes.
really enjoy. But it also goes back to a lot of these people have been seeing their country slip away. Their belief in institutions that have now shown, because of the internet, to be poor at best, like we were talking about in the beginning that I didn't record, the ability of government to function well. So the resonating line is, we will make America great again. These are really good, decent people who are patriots. They see the decline in our standing in the world deliberately done. They see the decline in our country deliberately done by those that we have elected. They are failing. So when somebody comes up, and I hate to make the analogy at the risk of breaking Godwin's law again, that now you've got another person who is saying, I can make my country great again. And they're glomming onto that because they're looking at him as a lifeline. Because somebody is finally articulating the
You may have to
things,
hold that point again.
the things that we hold dear. They want an America that I grew up in.
Well, I want to tell you a story after we come back about this and see what you think, because it's been bothering me for about 3 weeks.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We have all sorts of people queued up to say things, and isn't that just what we're here for? We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Excellent.